Welcome to Spiritual Insights for Challenging Times. I'm Ellen Barron, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to be exploring the timeless wisdom of the power of now and how it is a life-changing invitation to become fully present in this moment. So often we can find ourselves caught up in the past or thinking about the future. But today, what we're going to focus on is how do we come into this present moment, which is our deepest connection to our true self. This is actually where we live from. And I'm so excited to have as our guest today, Reverend Annie Nelson. She'll share with us how she and her family have been putting these principles into practice in everyday life. So together, she and I will share how it means to live more conscious, more fully awake and aware, especially because we're living in this time of so many different challenges. So take a deep breath, settle into this moment, and join us as we discover the power that's available right here, right now. Welcome to Spiritual Insights for Challenging Times. I'm Ellen Barron, and it is my pleasure to invite you to today's episode.
Hi, Ellen.
Good morning, Annie. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. This is such an important topic that we're going to be talking about, and I appreciate that you shared with me that this is something that you are working with your family with right now, this power of now. And that's what made me think this is the perfect topic for, I believe, for our listeners, because this can change everything with our personal life, the challenges we might find ourselves in. And for many of us, there's so much going on in the world around us that we can get caught up in worrying about the future or being stuck in the past. So how do you, what's coming to you? How do you define this power of now? What is the spiritual principle that you've discovered in working with your family?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ellen, for inviting me. And first of all, let me just say, I love this podcast and your title, Spiritual Insights in These Challenging Times. I just think you're very timely, and I just enjoy having any discussions with you. So thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you.
Yes, this is great. So my family and I, we do weekly family Zooms, and we just happen to be doing this, Eckhart Tolle's practicing the power of now. And of course, we, this is all a mindfulness-based approach to helping us, get rid of that constant chatter that goes on in our head. So he talks a lot about ego and mind and thoughts and how they all relate to our beingness. And I don't know if I've shared with you before, but I like to talk about my beingness as how I'm doing every day in using my spiritual attributes. And to me, that was the connection for me in this reading. And of course, my son and my grandson, they used this time to observe and get deeper insights and share how they feel about it. So to me, the core idea of this whole thing is to just be more mindful of where our thoughts are at any given time, because Tolle tells us that the present moment is the only real time. I love the way he said, a lot of times when we're talking and we're thinking, our thoughts are attached to the past or something out there in the future. And he says between the past and the future, there's a real small gap. And that's the present moment. And that's the only real time, because what? That's the only moment where you actually create that reality you want to see out there in the future. So that that present, what he calls now, is the creative energies that we need to be mindful of.
You know, Annie, I really appreciate your talking about that, because a lot of times if you think about just being present in the present moment, that works, and of course that will always be a help, but he takes it a step further. What he's trying to help us understand, I believe, is that um, our natural instinct, because of the way we are designed with our mind being a thinking part of us and our emotional body,
Mhm.
that we get caught up automatically in the fears or the challenges, the anxiety. That's our thinking. And one of the things that I know is that if I start to react with a fear or anger or something like that, that my mind starts to feed into that. So
Yes,
energy only increases. And that can be with remembering things about the past as well as anticipating what's going to happen in the present.
yes,
So to just focus on what I'm doing in the moment is the start, but he really says it's more than that. It's tapping into, as you mentioned, our being, into our divine part, which he calls, and I love this, is our true self.
my true
This
self.
this
Yes,
is where we have everything. And I
yes,
know that you do a deeper dive at our spiritual center on accessing those inner qualities, that and it's a really popular uh, gathering with the group on this,
yes.
and how we can release this present moment.
Yeah, you kind of broke up there, Ellen, but yeah, I think beingness is. We talk a lot about stillness and going to that place where we can be still and be silent in the moment, and it's in that space, in that moment in time, is where our real power is. Um, I don't know if it was Eckhart Tolle or someone else that said it's only a small step from the word being to the experience of being.
Mhm. I
And
like that.
that's what the present moment creates for you. It
Mhm.
creates that experience of being what? Being connected to your higher self or spirit or your source, you know, those things that allow us to be more calm in our spirit, to think more with clarity, and wisdom, discernment, those types of things. We can't do that when our busy mind is constantly throwing out all this other chatter about, what if and what am I going to do and what happened to me and da 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 da. That's that that's that busyness, if you will, that blocks us from being in the moment, being in the now. And the now, and why is it important, you say? Because
Why is it important?
yeah, the now brings us what? Peace.
Yeah.
And we're all seeking that peace and harmony. So that's the benefit of this practice of learning how to experience the presence, the now.
You
Is
know, Annie, I appreciate that, where you're talking about that we're connecting now with this inner quality, which to me is love. This is where we can tap into um, unconditional love, forgiveness, making choices and decisions that aren't reactive but responsive. So the first step to me is to say, how do we do this? How do we recognize when we're caught up in our thoughts? Because I think the natural place for most of us to be is walking around,
yeah,
right? Don't we have an inner self critic?
yes,
Who
yes,
here doesn't experience a moment where you say, "Oh my
exactly.
goodness, why did I do this?" Or, "Oh, do I really, am I good enough?" Whatever. Those kind of thoughts are natural. They come up. And one of the things that he talks about is that all of this is the false self. I think this is really important because what he talks about is the fact that we have to learn how to pause a little bit. We have to be able to be the observer. That's what I want.
Observer, yes.
Be the observer of what we're thinking. That's the first step, being the observer. And I've shared this in a recent podcast recently that I'm working with the book Nonviolent Communication with a group right now, and the first step for compassionate conversation is to become the observer. So here it is again. We and to me, what he was talking about, maybe you can go a little deeper on this after I say this, but what he's really talking about is being awake and aware that I'm feeling something,
Yes.
and maybe coming in with, what am I feeling? Is this feeling really connected to the moment, or is it touching a unhealed wound?
Right.
And what is this feeling going to teach me? And what do I need to understand without judging?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. He spends an enormous amount of time, and my family and I did too, on that word observer or witness. And it's a concept that you really have to think about. How do you observe your thoughts, right? And
Yes,
how critical is that to your beingness, right? When you really want to be, let's say, a better person, when you
right.
really don't want to constantly be behaving from past circumstances or events, when you really don't want to connect your identity to a circumstance or a situation, right? Your beingness is so important. So how do you observe those thoughts? How do you witness those thoughts? And we say in Unity and Eckhart Tolle and almost all spiritual leaders say, in order to prevent our thoughts from controlling us and our emotions, we have to learn how to pause and pay attention to them instead of letting them run our lives. And you're right, that's what most people do. They're letting these thoughts run there. I've heard people say, I am my thoughts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's nothing real or true about that. You really, so we have to take the time to observe and witness where our thoughts are going and how that's impacting our lives, how that's creating our reality. And I ask myself, is this fostering inner peace for me? Is this giving me clarity? And if it's not, then the practice is to learn how to disengage from those thoughts.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We might call that detaching, right?
Yes.
Detaching, surrendering. Yes.
Release.
Somehow finding that neutral spot within. And I think being awake and aware is always the first step. As soon as I say, oh, wow, this emotion is coming up in me. Talking about emotions, he also talks about that emotions are energy. And I love that because, listening to me, I always talk about everything is energy.
Yes.
And I talk about the fact that our emotions, they come up automatically.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for myself, sometimes I'll be in a situation where somebody says something and I'm reacting before I even, and I've been doing a spiritual practice for a long time, but my emotions are the human part of me.
Yeah.
And they're just there. And sometimes I'll just respond by being feeling hurt, feeling angry, not feeling understood. And if we don't catch ourselves and observe, oh, wow, I'll use the word anger for a moment, that I'm really angry.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very unfair, unkind comment.
Yes.
If I instead get into my head with like, why did they say that? What do they mean? Now I'm fueling that energy. So the thoughts and the story fuel the energy. And the pause allows us to, as you said, become awake and aware that I'm observing this neutrally. And now I can pause and breathe and the energy is dissipated. It's allowed to just move out from me, which sounds like, how could that possibly work?
Practice.
We said before non-resistance, and we said surrender.
Yeah.
So isn't that like almost a paradox? Like, how do we surrender
Yes.
to eliminate something that can really give us deep roots into
Yeah.
like,
Exactly. Exactly. That's funny because I was talking to a friend last week and we were talking about, anyway, something came up about let go, let God. And I came back, and in order to make them just really think about what they're saying instead of just saying the words, I was like, okay, what does that really mean? You know
yes,
what I'm saying?
yes,
And
yes,
and that's the kind of observation and witness we need to do. And
yes,
when we're letting go, letting God, that's all about what? Faith, trust, understanding, right? Not trying to control things all the time. So I like what you said, in the beginning. Yes, we all experience this monkey mind, if you will. We all do. So it's not about suppressing it. It's not about ignoring it. It's about being aware of it and then making a different choice. My family, they hear me say all the time, life is about choices. It's choice in every single moment that we're making that creates our reality. Choice is so important in this whole awareness, mindfulness scenarios. And so, yeah, it's
and
critical.
Annie, that's where we get to make the healthy choices, where we get to make the choices that allow us to not come from the fear, the anger, the pain, but
Thank
instead come from that being, as you are calling it,
you.
that true self, that divine part of us, that is where we're able to choose choose something where we are not coming from our small self. We're coming from a higher vibration if we stay with the energy, because love, peace, enlightenment, those are the higher vibrations. And
Yes.
to me, that's what living in peace and harmony is asking us to do. Come out of this reaction. My goodness, and it's so easy, I think, with what's going on today. All you have to do is pick up the phone, which, by the way, I've been reading about how addictive this phone is. And I have said to myself, I'm going to stop reading all of this crazy stuff that I read, because it puts those crazy thoughts in.
Yes.
To
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and to me, the journey of waking up is really, that's the purpose. That's the
Hmm.
purpose. We're
Yeah.
here to wake up so that we can bring not only peace and calmness and everything into our life, but bring it out into our world, bring it out to other people as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Because it's that energy we talk about is all that connection to the universal energies. We talk about the oneness. All
Yes.
of that's encompassed in this mind thought scenario, right? I Eckhart Tolle said nothing ever happened in the past.
Yeah.
Think about that. Nothing ever happened, ed, in the past. It happened in the now.
Yes.
Okay.
I love, yes, I love
Yeah,
that too.
it's
Making
like,
that distinction, because don't we stay connected to the past,
there you
revisiting it, remembering it? How many times have you found yourself saying, "Why did I say that? Why
go
did
all
I
the
do
time.
that?" Maybe
Yes,
regrets or anything.
yes, yes,
And the future's the same way, isn't it, Annie? The future,
yes.
the future's not here yet, but boy, how many of us are finding ourselves anxious, fearful, and everything else about what might be unfolding?
Just yesterday I had that experience thinking about this podcast, right? I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden my mind went to, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I need to go check this word. I was like, wait a minute, practice it now, right?
Yes,
Calm down, breathe, exhale. So yeah, it's natural because it's part of our human nature to to look at those things, but it's also important that we take the time
hmm,
to to use the past for what it's there for. Okay, it's
yes,
there for a lesson. Okay, it's there. It's good to reflect on it and look at what I learned from that. How did I grow? How did I build strength? The resilience that it caused, whatever. But it's not there to dwell in. And that's where I think people get lost. And again, that gap, right? We all of a sudden we're dwelling in the past, and then we don't have the experience of what you call life. We're not living when we're too far out there in the future, thinking about the future, or if we're constantly bringing up the past and not able to release that. And there's a whole big subject we can have. There's
Yes.
practices that you have to go through to help. Whether it's counseling, hypnotherapy, forgiveness practices, whatever, to help us to rid ourselves of this need or this drive or this urge or whatever to stay connected, so much to the connected to the past events or future events that they don't allow us to be in the now, which is our creative moment.
Annie, I'm so glad though that you mentioned that there are lots of different practices, because it's such an important part of being able to be in the present moment. We really have to learn how to move out of just being stuck in that thought process, the emotional, the human part of us, just the human part of us. And that's, I think, probably the biggest challenges that people, I would imagine, face. Because you can say to somebody, how much nicer and easier your life would be if you can bring your consciousness to just being present here in the moment, opening to all of those divine qualities that already are inherent within us. It's a very self-empowering way to live. However, it's so challenging to not, it's kind of, I mentioned this someplace just the other day. It's very simple as far as a concept, but it isn't easy, because what it requires is for us to make a commitment. It requires us to do our part. And like you said, there are a lot of different practices, and there are a lot of different mindfulness or meditative practices that do this. You can do guided meditations. Tara Brach has a lot of them that really get us to tap into what am I feeling? What am I feeling in my body? Eckhart Tolle goes into that as well. He doesn't just stay in our minds. What he does is he touches on the body part as well.
Exactly.
We need to be awake and aware to what's in our body.
And I'm sorry. You just reminded me. I don't know the quote, but he does do the body-mind connection thing. He says, if you ever want to know where your thoughts are, when you're not really clear whether you're in the negative cycle or whatever, he says, listen to your body. Your body tells you, where your thoughts are going, because you can't disconnect that from what's happening in your body.
That's again goes back to that it's energy. Because we'll take what I was saying before about anger. If I'm angry about something, my body starts tensing up. I actually can, I hate to say this, but I can actually feel the heat coming up in my body. And if I'm frightened, you can almost feel like that tension in your body, right? So one of the steps in connecting to your body is to say, like, put my hands where I'm feeling this. If it's in my chest, if it's the tension, put my hands there and allow myself to just connect. That is the pause also, because that's, like, to me, unplugging the energy of whatever is the emotion that's coming up. So that starts to give us the time and the space. What within me, where am I hurting? Where am I hurting? What's coming up?
He spends a lot of time talking about fear and the impact of having a fear mentality. So again, it all comes back to be an awareness of where your thoughts are, because it's impacting your energy, it's impacting your health, your well-being, your wholeness, it's impacting your whole life. So this journey of being present in the now can be so valuable, not just to us, but to the world at large, actually, you
You
know.
know, Annie, I know you now for quite a while.
Hmm.
And I also know that you're, as we mentioned before, that you're studying this book with your family right now, which I love. I love that idea that you're having these weekly discussions about spiritual growth. Yes,
So
right?
blessed, so blessed.
It wasn't always like that, was it? You know, your relationship with your family, when I began with you, there were challenges that
Yes,
were showing up with your son, with your grandson, with different things
mhm,
like that. And
absolutely.
that's one of the things I find so important about spiritual insights, because I've had those same kind of situations in my life. And I feel that it is my inner work, my focus on my ability to change how I show up, to become awake and aware of what I'm feeling, how I'm reacting,
Yeah.
that starts to change everything. It starts to change my relationships, it starts to change my life, starts to change how I show up in different things. As you said, it gives us the peace and the calm. Can you talk just a little bit about how taking these spiritual principles that we're talking about helped you navigate with your family?
Quickly, I got married very young and had my son when I was 20. No, I know I was 20 years old. Didn't know anything, didn't you know? So then I ended up being a single parent, and everybody knows that that's hard. And
Mhm.
so I tell people for the first probably 40 years of my life, I was living, I use the word unconscious, which means I just wasn't aware that a lot of my behaviors and my thoughts and everything were coming from a place of past experiences, embedded beliefs, all that stuff. I just didn't pay attention to it. And it wasn't until I started having, challenges with communicating with my son that I made a choice to start doing a personal looking at myself instead of looking outside of myself to try to figure out what was going wrong with my life or whatever. And as I started this spiritual growth, I went to different churches. I did Buddhism, I did Scientology, I did Baptist church, I did Protestant. I was raised Catholic. I mean, I've done it all. And it wasn't until I think I shared with you where I read a book, um, Living Truth. What was it? Emily Cady, uh,
Lessons in truth.
Lessons in Truth, and
Mhm.
then I did Science of Mind. And oh my God, it was just open. It just opened my mind up to all these other possibilities of how
Mhm.
to be. I'm back to the being. The
Yes.
whole thing just came back to how am I being? I can't keep playing victim to things that happened in my childhood or my marriage or my relationships. Those were, we keep hearing now, and I'm so glad it's everybody is saying it. Things happen for me, not to me.
Yes.
And then I started seeing it that way. This happened for what reason? What did I learn from this? Yeah, there
Mhm.
was a lot of bad stuff. How do I get rid of that bad stuff? Because then now that's in the past. How do I create something different? So it wasn't until I made a choice to go on this journey of looking at the lessons and the value from that lessons versus being stuck in the lesson thinking that's who I was, identifying with the lesson, that I was able to see my son and communicate with him at a different level. We actually, and I shared this with quite a few people, we were having a conversation once, and when you're talking to your kids and they have a whole different concept of life or whatever. But anyway, we were talking about things, and he was telling me how he felt about a certain situation growing up. And I, as a mother, went right on the defensive, right? Oh no, that's not what I meant. My intention,
Mhm.
da da da. And he just said, "Stop, mom, stop. This isn't about you." That was a beautiful wake up call for me. At that moment, I sat back and again, I made a choice to listen. I'm going to be a better listener.
You know, Annie,
I
I
could
just wanted to say, probably if you had not been on the spiritual journey, if he said that, you wouldn't have received it the same way, right?
exactly, exactly. All that reading,
Yes.
all that practice that I did, all the meditation I started doing, just learning how to, I didn't need all these friends and all this chatter. Just I didn't need all this energy coming into my house, into my life, where I couldn't even think clearly. Right? I'm so busy with my stuff and everybody else's stuff. I couldn't. There was no clarity. So yeah, by the time him and I had that conversation, you're absolutely right, Ellen. We were able, or I was able to listen. And that changed everything.
And Annie, I know that your son is a practicing Muslim, and I wanted
Mhm.
to mention that because you like me are in unity, and we have very specific ideas about spirituality, and open to the broader idea of truth, wisdom, ancient truth, but still there's certain ideas. And what I love is that we can, when we're not looking at religious dogma, when we're looking at spirituality, we can connect with these
Yes,
same ideas, these same insights, these same principles, because they go across the board. There, that's that to me. That's what unity is. Unity is
yes.
a spiritual journey, as opposed to what do I believe.
Hmm.
Isn't like I have to believe this, I have to believe this, which then makes me want to bring somebody into the same belief system I have.
Yeah,
It's really saying, like you said, how am I being? So it starts with us. How
yes,
do I how do I show up? How do
exactly.
I am I caught up in fear and anger? Because that's how I'll show up then. I'll show up angry, I'll show up fearful, I'll show up without this awake and awareness to
Exactly.
perhaps shift something. And I just want to say one other thing, that I had my son at 20 years old also, and it's way too young. Let me put it this way, it's way too young for this woman.
Hey,
For this
me
woman.
too.
I
I can
hadn't grown
agree.
up myself and found
Exactly.
myself becoming a single mother. And it wasn't until my spiritual journey that which again was focused on me, right?
Yeah.
My spiritual journey, my process of waking up and
Hmm.
looking at everything,
Hmm.
that when my son, 16 years ago, uh, when we found ourselves in, he had cancer and we were dealing with his health challenges, which were major and severe. I was like you. He ended up, because he had many surgeries, so his whole physical body was compromised. And he went to a therapist, a psychologist, and he would come out from those meetings and we would sit down and we would talk. And he was clearing up the stuff that he had suppressed about what happened in our early life together, when
Hmm.
I wasn't conscious of
Hmm.
being the present and loving and all of those kind of things. And like you, I wasn't defensive. I was
Yeah.
able to hear it, and it healed our relationship.
Hmm.
So I could not, I don't think that without a spiritual journey, which had already been 20 or 30 years, because I've been on a spiritual journey for 40 years now, but I wouldn't have been able to be as present
Yes.
like you were. So,
Yes.
I think the healing has to start here within us first,
Yes.
so that we can be open and
Yes.
hear what's coming up, you
Yeah.
know, what
Yeah.
what what the other person is really saying,
Hmm.
without our minds
Yeah.
interpreting it from our woundedness.
Exactly. Exactly. I totally, totally agree. Everything starts with self.
Yeah,
We learn that we can control things, not people.
right.
And so the healing of ourselves impacts everything else that we touches.
So,
Everything else that we
Annie,
touch.
let's leave our listeners with something that they can focus on from our conversation.
Okay.
I'm going to say this, and then if you want to add quickly to something, I'm going to just say that we become awake and aware when we start to become the observer. When we pay attention to what we're thinking and feeling without bringing judgment to it. And
Hmm.
you might want to expand on the pause, because that's where we start. Become awake and aware, and then take a breath. Annie?
Yeah, I believe that true creative power, peace, our infinite potential, all that is found in the now. And we stand in the presence of the now when we pause and we breathe and just, you don't find, you don't find peace, you choose it. That's
I
what I
love that.
leave you with.
I love that.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me, Annie. I
Yeah,
love talking with you always, and
absolutely.
we're going to do this again.
Yes.
So, for those of you that are listening today, Annie and I are going to do part 2 of Living in the Now. Thank you for spending your time here today. I hope that this episode was insightful for you, perhaps even offering some